All right, so we're about 3 minutes after 11. I want to go ahead and kick us off and dive in and get started because we got a lot of good information to get to today. So let's just go right ahead. So, good morning. Thank you to everyone who is joining us online. My name is Candace Perry, and I am the Director of the Office of Environmental Justice at New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection. And I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator for today's discussion. So, on behalf of the New Jersey Interagency Council on Climate Resilience, or the IAC for short, we would like to thank you for joining us today to learn more about extreme heat's impact on New Jersey's overburdened communities. The unique phenomenon that heightens temperatures in our most urban areas and ways communities can take resilience actions to reduce urban heat islands or UHI impacts and provide respites from the heat and safeguard public health when temperatures soar. So, in today's conversation, you'll hear us refer to overburdened communities as OBCs. The IAC was established by Governor Murphy through Executive Order 89 and consists of 26 state departments and agencies coordinating together at a state level to develop and implement short and long-term actions to address and mitigate climate impacts on New Jersey's economies, communities, infrastructure, and natural resources. Part of the IAC's mission is to educate New Jersey residents about and prepare them for the impacts of climate change and the actions needed to protect New Jerseyans. So, this webinar is the fifth in a series designed to educate the public on extreme heat. The first two in the seminars were held last summer. The first laying the groundwork for understanding warming weather patterns in New Jersey over time and expectations for that trend moving forward. The second, outlining the physical and behavioral health impacts extreme heat can have on our bodies and our minds. The third webinar, hosted in April 2025, focused on New Jersey's preparedness for and ability to respond to increasingly frequent and more intense heat waves. And the fourth, held last month, discussed the impacts of extreme heat on New Jersey built infrastructure with an emphasis on our transportation and energy systems. So if you miss any of those sessions, not to worry. The webinar recordings are posted on the events page of the Heat Hub NJ, and we'll drop the link for you to get to that. In addition, the IAC created short summary videos of those webinars, emphasizing the highlights of those discussions, and they are also posted on Heat Hub NJ. So we encourage you to review those sessions or those summary videos, as the information provided by those paneled experts is foundational for the more nuanced discussions that will be happening during the rest of the webinars in the series. So that brings us to today. Today we are exploring the strain. Today we are exploring the strain extreme heat places on New Jersey's most vulnerable communities. New Jersey's adversely impacted overburdened communities are those communities already impacted by a greater than average number of environmental and public health stressors that lack the social and financial capital to adequately address and respond to environmental threats, including climate impacts such as extreme heat. New Jersey defines its OBCs based on demographic criteria. At least 35% are low-income households, or at least 40% of the residents identify as minority or members of a state-recognized tribal community, or at least 40% of those households have limited English proficiency. So the OBCs are then screened to determine if they have a higher than average number of 26 environmental and public health stressors, such as air toxics, contaminated sites, and lack of open space, compared to their non-overburdened counterparts, to determine if an OBC is already adversely impacted. While direct heat impacts are not one of the 26 environmental and public health stressors that I just mentioned that are considered, percent of impervious cover and lack of tree canopy are. And these indicators can act as surrogates for communities that are likely hotter. This is because structures like roads, pavements, collect and absorb and re-emit the sun's heat more than natural landscapes such as forests and water bodies, leading to warmer temperatures. In addition to urban heat islands worsening high heat days, these communities are more likely to have residents that live and work in environments without air conditioning or are income constrained and can't afford to run their air conditioning consistently. These unique issues facing New Jersey's OBCs require solutions that work to reduce temperatures while also ensuring a support network that helps community members to create or find relief when temperatures rise. So today, we are fortunate to have a fantastic panel of climate justice advocates and experts to help us better understand how heat can impact these communities and consider solutions to make them more resilient. So I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, but we have longer form bios on the events page of the Heat Hub NJ. So first up is Jackie Park Albaum, who is the Deputy Executive Director at Groundwork Elizabeth, where she leads impactful initiatives that promote environmental justice, sustainability, and community well-being. Next is Dr. Clinton J. Andrews, who directs the Center for Urban Policy Research at Rutgers University, where he is a distinguished professor of urban planning. Dr. Andrews performs research on how people use and adapt to changes in the built environment. And finally, we have Nicole Hewitt Cabral. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Newark. She has over 20 years of experience designing and implementing innovative and impactful community-led strategies that build communities, advance sustainability, and elevate the voices and power of the historically excluded. So thank you so much. A virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you for joining us today. So excited to dive into the conversation. But first, let me give you a few housekeeping tips before we dive right in. So yes, this webinar is being recorded, and that recording will get posted on the events page that I mentioned earlier on Heat Hub NJ in the next few days. Audience members are automatically put in listen-only mode, and that's just to cut down on background noise during the discussion. And so today's discussion will be interview style. So as moderator, I'll have a few set questions prepared for the panelists, and then we'll turn it over to you all as audience members to see if you have any questions for us. And if you do, you can please just jot them down in the chat feature, and we'll do our best to get to them during the Q&A section. So that was a lot of background. I hope you're still ready and fired up for our conversation. Let's just get right into it. So this first question is for all of our panelists. So climate impacts like extreme and increasing temperatures are threat multipliers, making already intolerable environmental conditions worse. So in what unique ways can increasing temperatures for longer durations negatively impact New Jersey's already adversely impacted overburdened communities? So that'll be a question for all of you who wants to take it first.
Hi, Candace. This is Jackie. Nice to see you.
Hey, Jackie, go for it.
All right. So I'm a Groundwork Elizabeth, and what we've been noticing in the last, I'd say 5-10 years, and you can see that's Union County up on the screen. Elizabeth is to your right. What we've really been seeing, the biggest effect is in our kids working. We run a number of summer youth employment teams, and we have really had to cut down either on the hours they're working, the times they're working, et cetera. And we ran into the same thing with field trips. We have a small farm that we invite second graders to. And unfortunately, we had to pull off a couple days because of extreme heat. We're very conscious of what the effects are on our kids.
Thanks. What about you, Clint?
So let me jump in with what's on the slides right now. We saw Jackie's wonderful map of the redlined areas in in her county and especially in Elizabeth. And then this current slide shows the tree canopy vegetative coverage of the county. And what you see if you flip back and forth between the two slides a couple of times, go ahead and do that if you're able to control it. Let's see the red lines. Now let's see where the trees are. And oh dear, they're not where the lined areas are. So in other words, there's the historical implications of things like redlining are becoming more visible instead of less visible with time, because they have implications for what we experience on the ground in terms of heat. And so what we're seeing in overburdened communities, such as Elizabeth, as an example, is more exposure to ambient environmental stressors. That's in a way good news, because it means that property values are lower and locations are more affordable, but it does mean worse exposures. Also, you see things like occupational exposures, where people in those communities are somewhat more likely to hold outdoor jobs if you're doing landscaping or construction or maintenance. And that means you're outdoors in the heat more often. And probably the building stock is a little bit older and maybe less well maintained, and there will be less access to air conditioning, especially central air conditioning. That's one of the things that we've been seeing. And then residents may have more difficulty paying for electricity costs of air conditioning, which can be really pretty high during the summer, as well as having chronic health conditions and less access to medical care. Those are all things that are happening currently that are worse than they were a decade or so ago.
Yeah, I can jump in. I'm in Essex County, Newark, and have a very similar story with the correlation between areas that were redlined and a lack of trees. In Newark, depending on what statistic you're looking at, Newark has between 12 and 14% tree canopy coverage, and there's some neighborhoods that have between 3 and 5%. And as we know, there's a direct correlation between heat and lack of canopy coverage, but there's also a direct correlation between heat and crime. So we've been looking at heat maps as well as maps around crime hotspots, and have found it's one and the same. So the hottest neighborhoods of our city also, particularly in the summertime, have the highest crime. So as heat incidents, extreme incidents are increasing and being more prolonged, we're seeing that correlation. And as we're looking very intently at our heat maps, we're also noticing that it's kind of funny that some of our parks are heat hotspots. So areas that have turf, skate parks that are painted, also are very, very hot areas. So we're really thinking about where people gather, where safe spaces in the community where people congregate, especially at heat events. And we're finding that some areas that we would really think about that would be more of a cooling effect actually are heat hotspots. And then the other thing, when I think about overburdened communities like Newark, a couple of the things one thing that Clinton mentioned is energy burden. So in cities like Newark, where most of our residents pay exorbitant amount of our percentage of our incomes in energies, as the heat incidents are prolonged and are exacerbated, that's higher costs, and that increases the energy burden. And then the final thing that sometimes we don't think about is also access to transportation. So a lot of Newark residents use public transportation. Coincidentally, also in Newark, we don't have many actually shaded bus stops. So you'll see in heat events, a lot of our residents waiting outside in the heat, a lot of our most vulnerable residents waiting in the heat for public transportation. So those are all things that we're thinking about, especially where the most vulnerable residents in our communities, where they gathered, where they're using resources, and how to best formulate a strategy, a beat the heat strategy, to alleviate some of these incidents.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for outlining all of those experiences. So we'll transition to the next question. I have this one specifically for Clint. So studies show that people living in adversely impacted overburdened communities suffer from higher incidences of long-term illnesses like asthma and cardiovascular disease. How can extreme and prolonged heat worsen these conditions?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and it's a really important one. It's really quite clear that conditions such as asthma and cardiovascular disease are exacerbated by more extreme environmental conditions. The subtlety comes in that it's that we often see during heat waves, we also see more intense air pollution episodes. And part of that is due to the physics, that you need sunlight to create ozone, for example. But some of it has to do with the timing of emissions. So more frequent more higher amounts of particulate matter um, during certain times of the day, that kind of thing that relate to things like commuting patterns. And so one thing this means is that we are needing to disentangle these two effects of how much of this is because the air is contributing to my asthma, and how much of it is due to the heat stress. And certainly the hospital admission statistics aren't actually that helpful. And because they are treating, they're talking about the symptoms. What sent you to the emergency room today? Well, I feel terrible. And whether it's part of it is due to the heat and part of it's due to the associated air pollution. The second thing that I think is important um, in this particular aspect of the problem is the nighttime indoor exposures to heat. And if it doesn't cool off in your apartment at night, your body doesn't really get to rest. Instead, it's continuing to work to try to keep doing thermoregulation. And so it is the sort of accumulation of warm nights as experienced indoors by people who don't have great air conditioning or no air conditioning that starts to take the health toll. And that's why you often see that the peak emergency room visits aren't on the first day of the heat wave, but on the third day of the heat wave.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Clint, about how timing can be an important variable in the health outcomes and experiences that overburdened communities have. If you don't have cooler temperatures at night, your body's still working harder. So that was an aha moment for me. Really interesting. So we'll go to the next question. I'm going to put this for Nicole or Jackie. So while increasing temperatures create unendurable conditions during warmer than average summer days, heat waves present more immediate concerns in the same way that other natural hazards like storms or flooding do. So how does living in adversely impacted overburdened communities hinder emergency responses to extreme heat events?
Yeah, I can try and tackle this. So I've been with the city of Newark almost a year and a half, and I've been incredibly impressed by our initiative to address extreme heat. For us, it's led by the Department of Health and Community Wellness. They gather all the key stakeholders within City Hall and also some external stakeholders that would address emergency incidents, particularly around extreme heat. So we're looking at the Office of Emergency Management. We have epidemiologists at the table. We have Office of Homelessness Services. We have public safety, we have the Red Cross and other essential stakeholders, and really, really excited to share that for the last year and a half, the Office of Sustainability has been at the table. And it might be, some folks might wonder, why would the Office of Sustainability really be looking at extreme heat and be a part of that initiative? And for us, it's really important. Oftentimes when we're dealing with extreme heat, we are the way that I think about it is almost reactive. An incident happens, we call code red, and all the actors kind of move into place. Emergency management, homelessness services, folks are going out, working with different vulnerable groups of seniors, making sure that they know where to go. They have access to cooling centers, other services. But there are ways that we know that science and data shows that there are techniques, strategies that we can employ to cool our cities. Tree planting, tried and true. And that's an initiative that the Office of Sustainability is leading, where we are committed to planting 1,000 trees, at least 1,000 trees a year, and really excited to share that for the last 2 months, we actually have exceeded our goal for the year. So we planted over 500 trees this year alone. For us, we know that makes a difference. We're giving away trees to residents. And again, that's a part of this extreme heat strategy, making sure that we're really thinking about concrete ways that we can cool our cities. We're also really thinking about the connection between cool roofs and cooling our city. So we have a number of very concrete initiatives for Cool Roof. We're partnering with Newark Greenworks and our Workforce Development Board to make sure that we can combine workforce development, green jobs, with actually strategies to cool our city. So we're really thinking about it in very holistic and innovative ways, and really making sure that all folks are at the table. I mentioned with that group, it's mainly large nonprofits and city hall departments. So with the Office of Sustainability, last year we launched a coalition of groups that are concerned and want to address extreme heat. So that would include City Hall, but it also includes public housing. It includes libraries that serve as cooling centers, and it includes just a plethora of community-based organizations that are on the ground working to address resilience in extreme heat. So we're thinking about this in a very holistic way that includes community engagement to shape and inform how the government, how we make decisions.
That's great. I loved hearing about the holistic approach, that extreme heat is such a huge issue. No one office or department can tackle it alone. So I'm glad to hear the city has, a coalition of stakeholders at the table, and loved hearing about your proactive strategies instead of just reacting in the moment. So that's great. Jackie, did you want to get in on this question, or I have a next one for you? Jackie, can you hear us? Are you there?
Sorry, I will take the next one.
Okay, sure thing. So most people underestimate the impacts of heat and can miss warning signs for the onset of heat-related illnesses, so which can turn deadly, if left unchecked. So how can we better prepare those communities so that they know and recognize the signs and symptoms and can react?
Sure. Education. We work to engage the community, provide education, and then empower the community to make changes. Some things that really stick out to me is we've had the pleasure of working with Clint in public housing around air quality. And as such, we have ongoing community meetings that take place at different housing authorities and other nonprofits across the county. General public education sheets. And then one thing that particularly sticks out, as you may or may not know, Elizabeth is extremely diverse. We state that there's about 60 different nationalities represented. We have a very high Hispanic population. So we've been working to ensure that as things are going out, materials, that we're going in English and we're going in Spanish. And we've gotten some really good feedback from our friends down in right down by Port Newark. Their audiences often feel that they are not spoken to. They understand that there might be things going on, but they can't get. So for us, really focusing on who are we trying to talk to, how do we talk to them, and how do they listen? That's really looking at the adults. On the flip side, just going back to talking about our youth groups, again, it's education. This is what it looks like. This is what you need to be prepared for. All of our managers have received extreme heat training at this point, so they can spot any signs of issues in the project work that we're doing. And then even going back to our second graders who were visiting us at the farm. It's really hot today. Sometimes when it's really hot, we should drink water. So, education, education, education for the signs and the symptoms. And then jumping off of some of the stuff coming out of Newark, we have a really great network of cooling centers. Again, ours are also at our community centers and within public housing. And I have to say the numbers have just been going up. So people, at least in the Elizabeth community, are beginning to have a better understanding that extreme heat is an issue. Then what do we kind of look for to see if we're being affected? And then what are those strategies? And not to jump into anything Clint was going to say, but we have been working pretty heavily in air quality. We had the ability to make fans with filters on them to help decrease temperature, but to increase particles. So I would say that's really, how can you provide the tools to your stakeholders so once they can identify that extreme heat is causing them a burden, giving them the tools so they can then act on it.
Yeah, I mean, education is so important. You hit it right on the head. Really liked hearing about educating the general public, but also the people within your organization so that they can identify the signs and symptoms and help others to identify the signs and symptoms. That's so important. And meaningful education, meeting people where they are with the languages that they speak. So good points there. All right, so our next question is for all of you. Curious to know, how are communities implementing strategies to protect their most vulnerable during heat waves? And how do these strategies differ for various vulnerable communities, such as children? Jackie, you touched on that recently, the elderly, outdoor workers, and our homeless populations. So who wants to kick us off?
Candace, I'll actually jump in because it jumps off
Yeah, please.
What I was just saying. Groundwork Elizabeth has had a long and wonderful relationship with public housing, which has provided us with a plethora of information. And I want to I think they've done a really good job first in seeing that extreme heat is an issue for their residents, ensuring some of the older buildings are not air conditioned. The newer buildings are all air conditioned. But this was a point I wanted to put out there. I'm speaking specifically of seniors living in public housing. There's about, I think, 1,200. I might be off on that number. The housing authorities have actually put community knowledge boards right by the elevators. We have a couple not skyscrapers, a couple larger apartment buildings, and some of our residences are much shorter. So residents, as you're getting off the elevator or going in, are seeing that, hey, it's really hot today, drink some water, or, ooh, Canadian wildfires are here. Consider wearing a mask today. So I guess, again, we're really talking about education, but I wanted to highlight this community knowledge board specifically for seniors in housing. Yes, it also, we've worked to ensure that there are bilingual messages in there. About half of the residents or so are of Hispanic descent. But I think that was a really good one and ongoing. You can tell people something, but often we're busy, we're fast, we don't quite think things out. But if you see, hey, it's kind of like, hey, it's going to rain today, you're going to grab an umbrella. Hey, extreme heat, you might grab the extra water bottle. So that's what I wanted to add.
I would add that we found it really useful to think about, well, who can act on this problem? And what we've concluded is that everybody can act, but each in their own way. And so what that means is, if we know that a heat wave is coming, part of it is speaking directly to residents and You know, as Jackie says, reminding people, take that water bottle with you. And here's information so that you can decide for yourself whether it's a heat wave day or an air pollution episode. But then there's also a lot that a landlord or a housing authority can do that has to do with the built environment. You know, make sure that the community room is properly air conditioned. Extend the hours of the community room or the library so that it's not just during, you know, during working hours, but instead is during the hours when people need protection. And as I mentioned, that could be well into the night. And then there's also quite a bit that's needed from the better resourced parts of the community. And one thing I've really liked about what's going on in Elizabeth is that there is a group that donates window air conditioning units to people who don't have it otherwise in their apartments, and then also helps pay the summer electric bills. And it's that combination of the two that's so important in making apartments livable. And then the other thing we could show, I think there's a slide of our dashboard. Do you want to show that? If they manage to, I think Alec might have the control of the slides. Okay, so we've installed a bunch of different types of equipment at various places in Elizabeth that allow us to measure outdoor conditions as well as indoor conditions within people's apartments in certain places, as well as personal exposures with little handheld devices. Next slide. And the information on outdoor exposures is shared publicly through this dashboard. And so this is a fixed slide from a couple of days ago where you could see there was, out of all of the places that we monitor in Elizabeth, there was really only one where conditions were good. And the rest, we were suffering a little bit. And this is information that everybody can use. It also is displayed on those community bulletin boards that Jackie mentioned, and helps share the information so that, given that all of us can act in different ways, we all have the information on which to act.
And just to point out, while we're looking at the dashboard, when you look under the yellow heading for air quality index, you see these health recommendations. Sensitive groups should wear a mask, reduce outdoor exercise, close your window, maybe run an air purifier. And you know, the hope is, with hearing these things and seeing these things again and again, that we will see behavioral change from the people who were researching at this time, stakeholders.
Great. Nicole, did you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit. I think the strategies for those different groups that you'd mentioned, children, elderly, homeless, all have to be tailored for each of the group. They have different needs and circumstances, and there's even intersectionality between all those groups. When I think about children, just because that's always front of mind for me, I think about how families try and beat the heat during the summer. That's oftentimes going to parks, like I mentioned, and we have beautiful parks in Newark, and some of them that are excellent for cooling, and some of them are not. The park that's closest to my house has 2 benches. So everyone is crowded in those, under the trees under those 2 benches. So it's a beautiful park, but is it the right place for cooling? And in my opinion, it's not. It's also nestled between low-income housing, and you do see how folks utilize that space differently, and don't see it as a respite in times of heat. I also, you tend to bring your child to the playground a lot. And oftentimes that is extraordinarily hot during the day. So these are things that I think about. How do people utilize our environment, our space? And is the space actually able to address extreme heat? So these are conversations that we are having in Newark with all the different departments around that. Elderly or even other folks I've noticed in Newark, which I want to mention maybe a little bit later with the cooling centers, where how do people find relief in times of extreme heat? Oftentimes, they don't want to go inside. And I've seen that with particularly our elderly and our homeless. Our populations of persons that are unhoused. They tend to stay outside. So how do we find within our built environment, externally, or within our parks, how to create a infrastructure to actually cool folks outside that don't want to go inside in the summertime to cool off. So these are things that we're thinking about. There's no one size fits all strategy for any group, especially those that are most vulnerable. And then there's an initiative that we are working on to launch, and it's something that we can just do naturally, even without having a formalized initiative. And it's really being a buddy. So it's identifying a few folks in your community, on your street, in your building, that are particularly vulnerable, and checking on them during extreme weather events. Could be heat, could be wildfires, or could be extreme cold or a storm. And I think just harking back onto that, how we are as a community, strengthening community relationships, that social capital and connectedness, so that we can each support each other. And I love a lot of what Clinton and Jackie were talking about, making sure that those folks are equipped with the knowledge. Because a lot of times you can post as much information, and flyer, but folks oftentimes, just naturally as human, we need a trusted person to deliver that message, right? So that's something that we're thinking about in Newark through the Office of Sustainability, how to have this social connected program of Be a Buddy, where trusted folks on blocks, in buildings, are checking in on folks, making sure that we are okay. It kind of is an extension of another program that we have, Love Your Block Newark, where we give very small mini grants, well, $5,000, up to $5,000 to community-based organizations, really looking at neighborhood and block associations so that they can identify problems and solve them in a way that works for them. For us, we believe that those that are most proximate to challenges that they face are best situated to solve them. So it's very similar to that. How do we have folks that are living in community, working together, delivering those messages and supporting each other? That is the most sustainable way to think about extreme heat and really build a more community resilience.
Wow, what a great list of community strategies. We heard a lot of good ideas there. Really loved hearing about being a buddy from Nicole, kind of those tailored approaches, making sure that you tailor them for your specific audience. Loved hearing about the generosity from communities that maybe have more resources to extend them to others. Extending the hours of community centers and libraries, and loved what Jackie mentioned about making extreme heat days be more commonplace in the same way that a rainy day is commonplace. When you know that it's going to rain, you get your umbrella. When you know that it's going to be hot, how do we make sure that those key things that you do or grab that day are also as commonplace? So excellent list. We will transition. Just a quick note for Nicole. You are frozen for us. We can hear your audio fine, but I don't know if you want to turn off your camera, maybe turn it back on. You're frozen, but all good. We're still able to hear you. Okay, so my next question is for all of you again. So the simplest solution during a heat wave is to stay in air-conditioned environments. We talked about that. So, however, this option is not always available. For example, with outdoor workers and even workers in indoor heated environments, such as laundries and warehouses. So even when it is an option, it can result in other impacts, particularly mental health impacts, particularly on youth who may be trapped indoors and kind of isolated from their peers. So what are some of the ways that communities can address these limitations for these populations?
I could jump in with a couple of comments. So one thing that we found really useful is to help people understand their own exposure to extreme heat. And we do that partly with some of those different devices and things that we saw on the slide, but also with activities that explicitly focus people's attention on, am I exposed now? What about now? And we try to do it in a way to ensure that it's fun for everyone. And an example I want to give from last summer in Elizabeth was the mayor's heat walk. We got the mayor of the city to walk with a group of high school kids and a group of elderly people, all on the same walk. And we did a tour around the city of Elizabeth. It was short. It was only a half-hour walk, so not enough to cause anybody to fall over from the extreme heat, but enough for people to look over one another's shoulder at the little measurement devices we were carrying to see, aha, okay, look, it's 90 degrees. Look, now it's 95. And to really understand in a visceral, kind of experiential way, oh, okay, this is what the heat is like. And the thing that came out of that I just loved was, one, people started mapping their assets. They started to understand, well, here's the place I can go to cool off on this, in my neighborhood on this walk. And the other part that I really liked was the older folks loved hanging out with the teens, and vice versa. And they still talk about it. We had our first event of this summer this last Monday, and it was only with the seniors, and they kept asking, where are the young folks? And so this is the kind of bringing together of members of the community that makes this very dour message much more palatable.
I have an additional thing. It's slightly different, but I wanted to bring it to attention. When our work started with Rutgers and the Housing Authority and Groundwork Elizabeth, one of the early years, we did the FLAG program for air quality. I think this program now actually rests in within the DEP. So I encourage everyone to learn more about it for air quality. Things such as that are incredibly powerful and really helps us to address some of the limitations that our stakeholders have. Obviously, talking to 500 people will take quite a bit of time. So the flags, every day you'd put up a different color flag, I think twice a day, maybe even 3 times a day. You would change the color in a central location. It became quite a thing for our seniors. Oh, what's the flag at now? Let's go. So I throw that out. We can't, it's impossible considering, the size of our populations to always have individual connections. But programs such as that are easy to understand, not complicated, that the community can all understand, we have found to be pretty powerful. For instance, we'd like to bring the FLAG program next year into our schools. So our kids can understand, obviously different ages, but our kids can also begin to understand about air quality. I think, extreme heat could probably perhaps follow that same FLAG program. Thanks.
Great. So I just want to make a reminder for all of you watching. Feel free to put a question in the chat if you have it for the panel. I have a few more questions for us, but we'll get to 1 or 2 at the end if you have them for us. So we mentioned cooling centers earlier. I want to pass this back to Nicole. I think you mentioned it, but feel free to jump in, Jackie. When you talk about implementation and a response to extreme heat through cooling centers, are people in adversely impacted overburdened communities even aware of cooling centers? And if so, are they using them? Or are you seeing use of these centers on the ground? Why or why not? And if not, what barriers are there that make access to these cooling centers or what barriers exist and what makes it successful for people to access cooling centers.
Yeah, I can jump in. So we are that same extreme heat working group that I'd mentioned. We're working on compiling data, to be honest, to really be able to speak in a very definitive way around the use of the cooling centers. We're also working on creating a metrics to really measure the impact of that work. But from what the conversations that I've had is that for the most part, most of the cooling centers are very much used in Newark, and many of them are actually over capacity. So I guess it's a good problem to have. So we're thinking again creatively, sorry, about how to really serve all of our residents that are seeking respite in our cooling centers. Now, I'm sure there are barriers. I'm sure there are community centers that are not at capacity, and just a simple barrier would be making sure that those centers are evenly distributed. Well, we could either do evenly distributed around the city, or making sure that there are more centers open in areas of people who need it the most. Really, our centers are based on the locations of the libraries, the community centers. So it's not really based on the needs of folks experiencing heat and the ease of getting there. So those are things that we are thinking about, the use of the centers. I'm really excited to say, though, that for in the past, actually our pools, and a lot of times they are a part of our community centers, opens after the July 4th weekend. This is the first year that it actually opens on May 31st. And the following week, the first week of June, we had an extreme heat incident. So, and we were there. I was there at that pool, my neighborhood pool. So well used during that time. So we talked about extending the hours. There's a lot of complications regarding that, paying folks, making sure the AC is on, the facilities. It's not a simple fix. I know, because I've been asking around to see how we can fix it. But we are thinking really intentionally about how to extend the hours, and we are. So I think those are the things I would say about the cooling centers.
Great. Did you want to chime in, Jackie?
Sure. You know, we probably, I can't speak on behalf of the entire city of Elizabeth, and we don't run the cooling center, so I am not as well educated as Nicole on this. However, I'll say I do know we are well attended on our cooling days. Our public housing, we have about 6 senior buildings, and they all provide cooling centers within their community rooms. I think what ends up worrying me, you know, the most is for those seniors, and this goes into a bigger issue, those seniors who are more isolated and perhaps have transportation issues. A woman, and I'm just making this up, but you know, a 80-year-old woman living on a 4th floor who doesn't tend to go out, if there's an electrical issue, that's probably going to be a problem. So, you know, as we think about strategies on how to ensure that people understand that they're there, again, I think education and advertisement, public service announcements, et cetera, would be what I've seen, you know, what I have seen from the city. And it's interesting what Nicole said about the buddy system. The buddy system is huge in public housing. It might be about it's cool, it might be too hot, it might be that there's extra food at the pantry this week, or Dr. Smith has appointments. We have found, especially in the seniors, because the seniors tend to stay in public housing for the remainders of their lives, the buddy system is priceless. It really is priceless, because you can't go door to door when you have 800 doors. And I know the city of Newark probably sits in similar situations, and I'm just talking about public housing. That's to say nothing of the 20 to 30,000 people age 80 and above in the city of Elizabeth.
Sure, right. So next question is for all of you. How do the extreme heat impacts differ in rural communities? We've spoken a lot about the context of urban communities in Elizabeth and Newark, but what about rural communities? How do they experience maybe different impacts?
Well, I think the one is going to be the occupational exposures. If you're doing outdoor work, whether it's agricultural or construction, that's when you get the most intense exposure. People have the opportunity to build that into their lives as far as how they dress and how much water they keep with them and when they take breaks. This is something that's gotten national policy play as um, uh, occupational regulations have been put in place that are now in danger of being rolled back. Um, uh, but so that's one part of the story. The other part, though, relates to the isolation that we were just talking about. It's the naturally occurring affordable housing where you have to worry about people who are isolated and don't have ready access to a cooling center or even to a neighbor to check up on them. And that is where we need the rural version of the buddy system. We need somebody who is thinking about who haven't I seen lately, so that we can go and see if they're okay. The sort of the wellness check in the best sense of the word.
Yeah, who haven't I seen lately? That's perfect. What about Nicole or Jackie? Anything to add?
So I don't have experience in rural New Jersey, but I have lived in rural areas, particularly in the deep South. So I was trying to think about how they deal with it. I think it's similarly how we're learning to deal with it. This is a new normal for us, if you will. And we are developing strategies and policies and a culture of adapting and addressing it. And I think the same in the South. I think a lot of what Clinton was talking about, changing your work, just even I lived in Mississippi and Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, and you start your day earlier. you take a longer lunch, but you adapt to the weather a little bit more naturally. Then I say it's a part of you and a part of how you maneuver your life. And I think we haven't had to address that in the same way. And I think we're developing that culture of adapting. I don't know how helpful that is, but I think it's something that we can learn from our neighbors down south.
I would just finish off by pointing out perhaps, some stereotypes and wanting to dive far deeper into them. It is not necessarily cooler in the country. Very often they are getting, the extreme heat. And going back to everything we've said, education and tools to deal with it. However, just simply look at where, we sit. I sit in a city of about 150,000. Newark, I think, is over 200,000. No disrespect, just don't know the exact numbers. We're a huge amount of people. So there's many different people that are looking at these things, the DEP, et cetera, et cetera. We also are an incredibly progressive environmental state. I guess I just I want to say and voice the concern that extreme heat is still a concern in the rural areas, and they have less likelihood of having any infrastructure to deal with extreme heat. I have a space in upstate New York, and there's no cooling center. I can tell you that. So I think that we'll see better progress, or at least our more urban areas are going to be, leading as we begin to adapt better, as Nicole said, to extreme heat, because this is just where the resources are. And this is where the people are. One of the bigger concerns about even living in a rural area as you age is how do you get services? And I think that's something that's really my reflection, is how do you even get those services when you go from a city of 150,000 to a village of the same geographic size of 800 people. You're just not going to get the same thing. So something to think about.
Mhm. And so we are short on time. I'm actually going to give the last question to Clint and see if you can answer this in about 30 seconds. Nicole mentioned earlier about policies, like learning from others and maybe adapting some of their policies in New Jersey. So wondering if you can give us any quick examples of policies, either at the state or the local level, that New Jersey should consider to reduce the impacts of extreme heat on overburdened communities.
Sure. So two come to mind. One is very much in the hands of local government, and that's the urban tree planting and the other urban design activities. We can get extravagant and talk about we need more colonnades, something like that. And the second is really in the realm of landlord-tenant law. We need to more clearly establish the right to habitable housing, and to make sure that we define habitability to include not just some heat during the winter, but also some cooling during the summer. And that's something that can be done piecemeal, city by city, but it could easily be done with legislation at the state level.
All right, well, there you have it, folks. We have some takeaways for us, and maybe potentially for our legislature to help the state of New Jersey out on extreme heat. So thank you for that thought, Clint. And thank you to Nicole and Jackie for your insights, for your expertise. I think we learned a lot today, and I hope you all in the audience enjoyed it. So that's all the time that we have today for today's discussion. On behalf of the IAC member state agencies and departments, I would like to thank all of you panelists for sharing your knowledge, and the audience for joining us today. We hope that you walk away with a better understanding of how extreme heat can have more acute impacts on New Jersey's overburdened communities, and what actions communities and government can take to address those impacts and protect vulnerable populations, both in the near and longer term. So as I mentioned, the recording of this webinar will be posted shortly on the Heat Hub NJ, along with the recordings from the 4 past webinars in the series. So we encourage you to go ahead and visit Heat Hub NJ often, as we regularly update the website with new material and resources as they become available. So thank you so much for your time, and stay cool out there. Bye.